Terrell was my high school basketball coach at the school that I attended in Texas, and I had a love-hate relationship with Coach Terrell. And some of you that have participated in any type of sports, you may understand this analogy here in a moment. I loved him. I loved him because he represented the person that if I am impressed and could prove myself to, he was the gate to my stardom that no doubt awaited me in basketball. Well, the path was a little bit different, but I love Coach because he was successful in the past, and he came to our high school with this record, this reputation. It was great. So freshman basketball comes in, and I'm the little scrawny kid that comes in there thinking he's going to be all that or whatever, and I'm ready. Like, I have been on the driveway for hours practicing that long three-pointer from the wing or whatever, and I'm ready to impress. It is going to be significant. The high school's never seen this, talent. I'm being obviously very sarcastic in that space. But I was ready. I was ready to go. And I walked into practice those first couple days of my freshman year, and I got to tell you what, he really disappointed me. My expectation was here, and he did not meet the mark, because for the first few weeks of basketball practice there, of teaching all these kids, we never once got to put this basketball into the hoop. He never got to see my amazing range on the court. I don't know what he was missing out, right? But the first few weeks of practice, the only thing, I can hear it to this day, it's like in my mind, it's still there. The only thing I could hear Coach Terrell talking to us was, fundamentals, boys. It's all about the fundamentals. And I was just like, are you kidding me with the fundamentals? Let me show you. I've got a shot here, whatever. It was the fundamentals. And we would do these drills all the first few weeks. And we'd start at one baseline. And like, all right, you're going to drive, and you're going to go right hand down, and you're going to go left hand back. And I'm like, okay, Coach, we got it. And then, he started doing all the stuff, and he made us do crossovers and all this thing. And I'm like, Coach, I got it. You got to see my shot. And he's like, we're going to do fundamentals. And then he said, okay, boys, it's time, put the balls down or whatever. Now we're going to work on defense for like a week. I'm like, Coach, you got to, no, it was the fundamentals, boys. You got to see the fundamentals. And we would work on defense. And he would always say, your defense is played with your feet and your legs, and stop playing defense with your hands. That's when you're fouling out of games. And you got to move your feet. And we'd do these shuffle drills, right? And I tell you what, we'd shuffle back and forth, zigzagging across the court so many times. I promise you, it's like my high school had 2 floors, and I'd had some classes on the second floor, and you could tell all the guys that were in basketball practice, because their quads aren't even really functioning after those first 2 weeks. And it's just, and it's all fundamentals, boys. It's all about the fundamentals. And if you do this, we're going to win state champions, blah, 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 all this stuff. I was like, Coach, you're killing me right now. I just want to shoot. All about the fundamentals. And I was thinking through all these stories about, you could use any different illustration in that mix. You could use any sports. I thought about having Pastor Clayton come up here and demonstrate the fundamentals of a perfect golf swing. Because if you've never seen it, Pastor Clayton has it, right? I don't, he does. I thought about having some of you that are in business, illustrating that way, to say, hey, there's some people in this room that are the most organized calendar people on the planet. Like, if I looked at your phone and your count, like the next day that you're going to go to this doctor or to get a manicure or a pet, you've got it all scheduled out, right? You have to, because you're great in the fundamentals of those areas. But for me, that's one of those areas that is really easy for me to see in the other stuff of life. It was easy after I got over my pride in my freshman basketball days, right? And just so in case you were wondering, I didn't last long at all, right? Because number one, talent wasn't there, and there were some other things for me. But I do remember the lesson of fundamentals. But for me, it was really easy to finally grasp that concept of understanding fundamentals in those areas of my life. And yet it has, and I have a feeling some of you may be with me here, it's sometimes very difficult to see the fundamental principle and the idea of those basic disciplines in my spiritual life as well. And at the beginning of a year is a great time for any of us to assess the fundamentals. Maybe in our house, we may need to clean out and say, clean whatever room and reestablish the principles. We know are right. I'm not going to do this for this year. I'm going to do better in this area. And we can see it in those areas. But today, as we look at the next phase in this story that we've been looking at in the book of Joshua, I believe there are some really clear principles that God wants to challenge us in as it relates to his word in this idea of the fundamentals. We've been talking about the book of Joshua and how that there's this word of advance, and that when we take these next steps in the plan of God, it's really important that we understand that in this process, the fundamentals are very, very important. Last week, we talked about the faithfulness of God. And if you weren't here last week, just summarize. Joshua is leading the children of Israel. Moses, the former leader, has died. Joshua is taking over the leadership. And he's got this trajectory of entering into the promised land. And there's a hurdle in front of him called the Jordan River. And the Lord miraculously divides the waters. They cross through the Jordan River. They're over on the other side of the Jordan. And God says, hey, remember what I've done. And in fact, he even told them to make a memorial for the faithfulness of God right there after they crossed the Jordan River. We talked about the faithfulness of God, that it is appropriate, especially at the beginning of anything new in the new year, to say, God, you have been faithful. And we had just kind of a token for many of you that were here last week and had the little stones on the front steps that just said faithful. If you weren't here last week and you want to get one, there's baskets on the back table, my right and left here that have some more of those. Take them. We don't need them. We want you to use them. In fact, this past week, I was talking with one of our family members who's walking through an incredible crisis in their lives. And she was here at the church. In fact, Pastor Tom was walking in with her and just hugged her neck and said, praying for you. She reaches in her pocket and pulls out her little black rock and the words faithful. And she says, I'm holding on to this because I know God's been faithful in the past and he will continue to be in the future. So make yourselves available to that. Just a reminder for the faithfulness of God. So they're on the other side of the Jordan in this story. And there's some reminders that they had to be just made aware of in this space. And they had, many of them, I'm sure, had known words of their forefathers and all of the posture of God and the faithfulness of God to Abraham and all the heroes there. And in fact, they would have known the principles and that God had brought them out of slavery in Egypt. But it wasn't just to bring them out and say, wow, you've been delivered. But he also brought them out so that they could be brought into this promised land living. Deuteronomy 6:23 says, he brought us out that he might bring us in. He brought them out of Egypt so he could take them into this promised land. He didn't bring them out just to let them wander around in the wilderness perpetually. And I just want you to hear something today. Neither did he bring you out of sin so that you would live in this on the banks of the Jordan mentality. Just, wow, look at the memorial of what God has done. Thank God that your life is a trophy of God's grace. I'm so celebrating in that, and I love it, and looking across this room to see, wow, what restoration and what amazing trophy. But beyond that, God wants us to take these next steps and to be victorious in our living. He didn't bring you out just to be brought out. He brought you out so that he can bring you into this next step, this promised land type living. And in order to do that, the fundamentals have to be present in our lives. We understand this principle, not just because that's a great illustration and you can use, whatever. No, it's actually in the story that we read in Joshua. We see that once they crossed the Jordan, there were these practices, these disciplines that they would have known and would have been part of their upbringing and life and tradition that had to be recommitted to and reinstilled into their space. And that's where we pick up the story today in Joshua chapter 5. So if you've got your Bible or whatever, if not, you can read with me on the screen here, go in your tablets or whatever. But Joshua chapter 5 is where we pick up the story today, talking about the fundamentals. It says, when all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings who lived along the Mediterranean coast, they heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan River so the people of Israel could cross, they lost heart and were paralyzed with fear because of them. have in my notes a little asterisk here to just give you this thought. This is not this is extra. This is bonus for you. I don't know what your struggle or what your hurdle that you have confronting you in this next year, whether it real or perceived in your mind. But I know the promises of God, and many times God already has gone before you and is beginning to disarm the tactics of the enemy that come against you. He's already working on your behalf. How do I know that? Because the Bible says that all things work together for the good of those that love Jesus. Can I just encourage you with something today? If you're facing a trial already in this beginning of the year, you know, well, it's coming. I just know, whatever. If you follow Jesus, I know sometimes don't always work out and make it easy for you, but they always work out together for the good of those that love Jesus. And we see this principle in this story of Joshua, that even though there were battles about to be faced, that the Lord had already preceded those battles with the reputation of, hey, don't mess with those children of Israel, right? Because God is on their side. There is a fear that was beginning to be struck in the lives of these kings that they would be confronting in the future. It goes on to say this. At that time, then the Lord gives Joshua these fundamental type directives into his life. He says, make flint knives and circumcise this second generation of Israelites. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the entire male population of Israel. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, right? I tried this morning. It was embarrassing. So there we go. Joshua had to circumcise them because all the men who were old enough to fight in battle when they left Egypt had died in the wilderness. So there's this wilderness journey going on, that the traditions and the fundamentals of the faith at that point, that there's those ways that people showed their commitment and directive towards the Lord, that there was this transition phase in the wilderness that the Lord was reinstilling this. So they had to do this because of all of this time of their journey had kind of caused a lapse in this. It goes on to say this in verse 7. So Joshua circumcised their sons, those who had grown up, to take their father's places. I love that. I love the generational distribution of the commitment to the Lord. There's this, it doesn't stop in one generation, but it continues into the next. I love the principle there. For they had not been circumcised on the way to the promised land. We're not going to get into the details of what that has all involved, because quite honestly, that's a deep conversation, right? If you don't know what that tradition was, then ask your mom and dad. It'll be great, okay? We'll just move on. But there was this tradition there that had to be reinstated. It was a fundamental. It goes on in the 9th verse of this chapter. It says, Then the Lord said to Joshua, today I've rolled away the shame of your slavery in Egypt. So that place has been called Gilgal to this day. While the Israelites were camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, here comes the next one, they celebrated Passover, a fundamental that had to be reinstilled. It was there that he was reminding them, hey, do these things. The fundamentals are there. On the evening of the 14th day of the first month, the very next day, they began to eat unleavened bread and roasted grain harvested from the land. No manna appeared on the day they first ate from the crops of the land, and it was never seen again. If you know the story here, it was this daily bread that the Lord was providing to them. And it wasn't that they stored up, but it was daily. It was that dependency that the Lord was creating on them. And yet, when they enter into this promised land, that stopped. There was this next phase in their living that the Lord was trying to get them to understand. When you instill these fundamentals, when you believe and depend upon me, I've got great things in store for you. This promised land, this next idea of how I want you to live is greater than you can imagine. And they began to live on the bountiful crops there in the promised land. From that time on, they ate from the crops of Canaan. There was this moment when they had to understand what a great victory crossing the Jordan River was. It was amazing. I just have a feeling that some of them probably said, let's just sit here and wait and just that's awesome. No, Joshua said it's time for us to reinstill some of the fundamentals, because there are victories that need to be won ahead of us. There are battles that need to be fought, but we know that God is preparing us for a victory ahead. They had to recommit for the victory to be present in their lives. And so do we. And so do we. I've grown up in church all my life. My story, some of you may have the same story. I remember as a young kid, my mom and dad, it was not an option. Church doors were open Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, you were there. Like you were there. There were those disciplines that were in my life. Can I tell you that because of those disciplines, those fundamentals in my life, that it has been easier, not just automatic, but easier for me now to have those disciplines present as well as an adult, as a dad, as a husband. It's easier. It's not impossible for them to fade away, but it's just been easier. Now, how has it stayed in my life? Well, number one, the call of God has been really strong, and I haven't gotten it right all the time. But I know that I have had to continue to make a decision to train myself to be disciplined in the fundamentals. Does that mean I get it right all the time? Absolutely not. Does that mean that there are moments like today is for me as well that I don't have to like re-up that focus? No, it means the exact opposite. It means that we all need to. In fact, if we're not careful, those of us that have maybe had more experience in this journey with Jesus, we are more likely, it's more likely that we would have the tendency to just kind of coast and say, oh, it's all good, we've got it. Can I push on you a little bit into that space and to recognize that there is a level of complacency that can set in even when you just cross a Jordan River type moment to say, God is working through us and we're good. It's in those moments where the Lord would encourage us to recommit to those basics, to the fundamentals that encourage us to go forward into those next victories. I know that for a fact in my own life. I've seen it work in some of yours as well. That's why Scripture says too that we have forsaken our first love. That many times when you're newly in this relationship with Jesus, I love the fact that new Christians, they're like ready. Let's go, whatever. And some of us, we need to reclaim that passion, right? And I can tell you that you can do that when you go back to some of those basics and say, I want to go back to that moment when it first came alive in my heart and reinstill those. All throughout history, we have seen how that so many times it becomes more easy for us to fade away than for us to really double down, so to speak, in our relationship with the Lord. C.S. Lewis is an author that many of you have heard quotes from and read, and trust me, his books that he's written, they're heavy, right? He goes deep really quick, but he articulates this idea of continually training ourselves in this space in this way. He says this: one must train the habit of faith. Make sure that if you've once accepted Christianity, then some of its main doctrines shall be deliberately held before your mind for some time every day. Remembering the basics is what he's saying. That is why daily praying and religious reading and church going, he calls it, are necessary parts of the Christian life. We have to be continually reminded of what we believe. Neither this belief or any other will automatically remain alive in the mind. It must be fed. As a matter of fact, if you examined 100 people who've lost their faith in Christianity, I wonder how many of them would turn out to have been reasoned out of it by honest argument. Do not most people simply drift away? My experience has been, an observation in the church, that the answer to that last question is yes. That's how it happens. It's not there are no logical and truth-founded arguments to be talked out of this relationship with Jesus. This is truth, and the beauty of the gospel, when it comes alive, it changes and transforms, and yet we're still flesh. And we live in a fallen world that too often there is the propensity and there is a tendency to drift away. I think C.S. Lewis was right that we have to train ourselves, and today we have an opportunity to posture our hearts in such a way that we would do that. So, as we dive into this story a little bit more, there are two pieces of this idea of the fundamentals as it relates to our Christian life. And no, it's not about just trying to figure out how you go right and go left and all that. And you can figure out whatever analogy you need to make this connection. But in our spiritual life, there are some very basic fundamentals that we have to see instilled that I believe that Scripture teaches us are keys to the victories that come after us. Number one is community. That we would have this idea, and when I say community, I'm going to explain this a little bit. It was what we talked about a minute ago with C.S. Lewis said church going, and we're going to expand that a little bit because I think there's a greater definition that Scripture teaches as far as how this life of faith is lived out in our lives. This was never meant to be a solo sport. This was never meant to be an isolationist type of endeavor. This was always meant to be worked out in the context of community. That's why Scripture says, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there am I in the midst of them. And in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, that when you agree together with someone in prayer, that it will be done. There's this beauty of community that the Lord wants us to, especially at these times of years, to say, hey, let's re-up our commitment to this fundamental of community. The writer of Hebrews says it this way. He says, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Can I tell you that I absolutely love being in the house of God with all of you. There is nothing like it. It's a moment for us, yes, to receive from the Lord what he needs for us to have for the rest of the week. We get that in the context of community. I love, even this morning, I have my spot. We all kind of have our little spots where we gravitate to. Some of you get tricky and you like bounce around all over and I'm like, hey, I didn't see you. Oh, you moved over here. But we all have our areas of familiarity, right? I love sitting over here, and part of that's just logistics so I can be up here quick. But I love sitting here and just watching. I don't see many of you guys over here, and that's maybe why I focus on you a little bit more, because you're behind me there or whatever. But I see you worshiping, and can I just tell you that your worship, it fills my tanks. It's just encouraging to me. When I looked over this morning, I see every week, I see Pastor Josh passionately worship. I love it. This morning, Phyllis, I love seeing you worship, young lady. You are just passionate in what, yes, going after Jesus. And it stirs me up. I'm just like, yes, and yes, and yes. And I look around and I start naming names, and that's going to be dangerous, right? And I looked over this morning, and she slipped out. She's working, but Macy Blackwood was over there worshiping. I was just like, yes, young people worship. I look up on the stage here a minute ago, and Connor's not playing at a moment, and just worshiping the Lord fills my tanks. I understand so many of you, you get encouraged by that. Why is that important? Because the Lord knows sometimes that we need to be in the environment that when our faith is weak, it encourages us. Some of you look across the room and you say, I know their story. I know what they've walked through. And if they're worshiping in the middle of this, maybe I should too. I know their story. I know they've walked in and they've had a fight. Like, it's been a tough week, and they're offering a sacrifice of praise. And it encourages us. It strengthens us. I watch up here a little bit because of where I'm sitting. I love when Ben plays the drums. I love all of our instrumentalists worship. I love it when Ben plays the drums because it's not just playing an instrument. It's a worship. It's offering that worship. I love the passion there. And we get that when we are in the room. Being a part of a healthy body is not just about coming in and receiving. It's also about giving. I love the fact that when you walk through the lobbies, there's encouragement going on. There's people loving on people and just recognizing people in need. I love walking, especially over into the West lobby when moms and dads are dropping off kids. And there are some of the moms and dads, when they walk into that space, it's like once they get those kiddos registered and that sticker's on the back, it's like they've just won a marathon, right? And they are just like, you see them spiritually just like going through the finish line, and there's just joy all over their face. And there's like, someone has my kids forever. Allie, I see that in your face. She's like, I feel that. But there's these moments. Isn't that great? It's awesome. That's part of community. It's incredible. I love those moments. And I'm focusing on here a little bit, but I've seen it a couple times. In fact, a couple Wednesdays ago, I was walking into the West lobby over there, and there was a mom that was dropping off her kids, and she was struggling, and it was just like corralling, and it's like herding cats sometimes, right? You get it. I understand you moms. And she finally got the kids checked in, and she just feels this relief or whatever. And I talked to her a little bit. She says, I just love Calvary Kids. I love what's going on here because my kiddos have really struggled to find friends at school, and they found friends here. And so, man, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I don't have anywhere to go, but I just know that my kids need friends. And so in the context of community, they found something that they need. I'm telling you, there's a moment when the switch is flipped and we realize, being involved in community is not just receiving, it's also because I may have something someone else needs. We need to make room. The poster on the back wall in this community expansion is not just about expanding buildings, although one day God's going to push us into that spot. I believe that, but it's about us making room in our own lives for relationships. I love the large gatherings that we have. I love the church. I love being with you in the morning. I love worshiping together. Quite honestly, it's who I am. I love it. It's all there. It's personality. I love it. But even more than that, it's biblically driven, and the Bible calls the church, us, his bride. And I don't know about you, but when we are in that mindset, we should treat the bride of Christ with respect and honor. And when the bride walks in the room, people stand, and there's a reverence, like, they're and the church, we are the church. And boy, it's just an awesome place. I love it. I love the encouragement that comes. I love the lobby conversations. It's not just in these rooms. It's in the cafe and after a service when some of you that may need to receive this little encouragement, not to just jet as soon as we stand and you're, man, I'm going to be the first one in the parking lot, right? I'm out, right? Whatever. Linger, stay and visit, and maybe just say hi to someone or whatever. But when you do that, there's conversations that can encourage you and strengthen you. It's not just about what's in here. Hopefully every week you're going to hear the Word of God taught in such a way that it's not just something that you take here, but it's something that is here and then lived out in the week. And that'll happen in these gatherings. I love also, I said it this morning, I'm going to say it again, moms and dads, it's not just in these moments. I try, as pastor of this church, I try to communicate at a level that everybody in here can understand. Do you understand that I understand? No, do you understand that I understand? Yeah, anyway, I know that some people, when I walked out here with a basketball, you kind of like, just preach or whatever. But then there's some of you that are like, hey, What? He played basketball or whatever? And I got you, right? There's a communication part there that is that moment there where we try to communicate. So I know that that's difficult in a room like this. I'm saying this to you moms and dads to say this. There are those moments when a Sunday morning is great. I get it. But as a student in junior high or high school, we also have moments and gatherings that Pastor Josh and the team lead on Wednesday nights. And can I lovingly push into this space a little bit? Now, let me give you a balancing statement, and then I hope you understand. I'm not saying that a Wednesday night whatever is the only key to your child's spiritual development, but I'm also saying it doesn't hurt. And I'm just wanting you to encourage you a little bit to please don't be that parent that comes and complains about a young adult child that doesn't prioritize the house of God when you're not the parent that also doesn't prioritize it for them when they're in junior and senior high school. There is a posture of priority that we as moms and dads have an opportunity to say, we will value the house of God. We will value community. I love what God's doing in and through our student ministry. Are we perfect in it? No. Will we ever be? No. But we're trying to seek the Lord, hear from the Lord, and lead into that space. Community is a big deal. the next generation of followers of Jesus, that we have the privilege of stewarding those relationships, they need to prioritize that, not because we think it's a style thing, but because God's word says, don't neglect meeting together. What you value in your house right now will be priority for them in the future, and if you don't, it won't. Can I say this as pastor here? I understand that even, I'm picking on the youth ministry a little bit, number one, because I love this couple, and I love what they're doing, and I think that there's a key to next generation ministry if we as parents come alongside and say, hey, our kiddos are worth it. I know we've walked through some transition at Calvary. Every church in America has, in the world has. COVID messed things up, and young people were just jerked around in different areas, and whether it related to school and how can we go, can we not, whatever. There was this isolation in a generation. Many of them missed high school graduations. Many of them missed the prom and all these things. And in the middle of that, some of us also allowed our kiddos to miss what God was doing in church. And I understand the reasons why. But you have to understand what we walked through. And then for us here, we walked through transition and leadership, and I get it, but what I can tell you with all assuredness in my heart is that if we're going to steward this legacy that God has given us in the next generation, we got to be all in. And I'm here to say as pastor that we have the idea, or we have the opportunity to come alongside you as parents and be that third voice. You say, what are you talking about, John? This is a principle Pastor Josh and the team understand, and I love it. It's that we need to teach this next generation that the voice of God is the number one thing. Teach them to hear God's voice through reading the word and listening to God's voice. God's voice is number one. You as mom and dad, you're number two. You are the number two voice. And our desire, and Pastor Josh's desire and the team, is to be a third voice that would be the echo of the first two voices into your students' lives. Sometimes your kiddos hear it differently from a third voice than they hear it from you, and that's okay. There are opportunities that God has given you to prioritize community in your family, how you are raising your kiddos. Don't be the mom or dad that complains about their young adult kids if you haven't prioritized the house of the Lord in junior and senior high school. In the first service, there was a little bit of smattering of applause there, and I understand the hesitation. Don't do it now because it'd be manufactured. But I understand. You start talking about parenting, and you're like, woo, stepping on toes. I love you. I love you enough to encourage you to improve a little bit. I've got 3 kiddos. I understand it. Sometimes it's a struggle. It's worth it, mom and dads. It's worth it. Keep fighting the fight. Prioritize that. Community is a big deal. I love the large gathering. We're gonna hurry through the last pieces here. I know the time. I don't only love the large gathering. I love what God's doing at Calvary Church in the small groups. I love it because it reflects what Jesus did. Jesus talked to the multitudes. He had the small, and then he kind of got smaller and smaller. He had the 12 and the 3. He understood small groups. I love what God's doing through the methods. These are some of the fundamentals of what God is telling us to just lean into a little bit more. I want to encourage you that if you're only a large gathering person, there's more for you. It is very easy, especially in a church this size, to come in, sit, shake a few hands. Hey, brother, all's good, gone. And never go deeper in any type of relationship. And you know what the enemy says when he sees a person like that? He says, wow, that's a little bit easier target because there's no backup. Like if you're out on your own, that's really tough. It's really tough. I love the fact that we've recognized that in some of our ministries. In fact, if you're looking for small groups, you go to calvarytriad.church under groups, there's all kinds. Let me tell you what God has done in the last few months, and we're going to look at last year. Small groups are a big deal. We say this. This is a fundamental. This is however it plays out for you. Just make sure you're plugged in, not just in the large, but in the small. So in December of 2022, we had 21 unique small groups. December of 23, 36. That's a pretty good growth. Is that enough? Nope, it's not. You know, we talked about between services that we have some focus not discrepancies, there's some weaknesses. There's some demographics here that need other ministries' involvement. And so we're leaning into that. We recognize, we see those numbers. We want all of us, moms, dads, everybody to be involved in those. December 22, we had 355 small group memberships. If you attend a small group or if you attend two, you would count as two, right? So there was 355 in that in December 22. In December 23, 769. I'm not really good at math, but that's more than double, right? So that's incredible. That's awesome. And I'm not here to just encourage you into this space. I'm here to say to you, good job, way to go. The reason why that's important is because when we look at the fundamentals, it's not just about coming in and sitting, it's about engaging with other people. And it's not just about receiving, it's about giving. So, I can't teach. I'm not talking about teaching. That's a different level. I'm talking about involvement and being a friend and being involved in relationships. Jesus really encourages us to do that. So those are incredible. I love this last number. It's not a typo. Fall 23, the average weekly small group attendance was a 373% increase from previous year. Now, yeah, there you go. Now, let me be honest. You can make stats say whatever they want, right? Because the way my wife gave me these numbers is she leads our small groups, and the numbers as far as attendance were still pretty low. But they were really low a year prior. All that to say, you got to start a baseline somewhere, and we're recording things a little bit different and better now, so that's there. But I just know that the trajectory is right, and it's us at the other side of the Jordan saying, "Hey, this is a moment. We're gonna go and we're gonna fight these victories. But in order for us to do that, Coach Terrell, you got to have the fundamentals. You've got to have those instilled in your life, and being involved in community is such a key part to that." So let's keep going. It's not just about community. It's not just about the big. It is about the personal. And the second piece of that is as far as fundamentals for today, and we'll go different places in the weeks to come. It's just a personal responsibility for spiritual growth. Can I talk to all the dads and the men in the room? Church demographics and church statistics will show us across the board, not just Calvary, that women, that the female membership and even leadership and engagement in churches is more than likely in every church, it plays out, is higher than men. Why is that? Well, there's one reason that I believe, and I believe that we are in a spiritual battle, and the enemy understands that if he can control who God has designed to set as the spiritual leader and the head of the household, if he can destroy that dynamic and keep the men from being the spiritual leader of the household, then the fight is a little bit easier. Men, can I just call you out a little bit alongside of me and say, lead your family, get them involved. Get them involved in those areas that they need to be engaged in. Be the man of God that God has called you to be. Not that maybe, I've never done that in the past. I understand some of the things that you say, I've never given that, so I can't give it, right? But we'll find people, men of God that are here, that if you need help, myself, the pastoral team, we can help you connect in those areas. Pastor Rick sitting right down here, Pastor Tom, Pastor Scott, we would love to have those conversations to say, hey, here's some people that are kind of doing it right, and you need to just be around them, and they can help you. Men, let's lead. Let's lead take personal responsibility, not only for your spiritual growth, but for your families as well. Remember the C.S. Lewis quote that we talked about? We don't gravitate towards more of an increased disciplined, godly life. We actually, because of our flesh, we have a tendency to gradually fade away. We have to train ourselves. Paul said it this way to Timothy to reinstill that same thing. He said, train yourself to be godly. Physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better. Promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. This is a trustworthy saying, and everyone should accept it. This is why we work hard and continue to struggle, for our hope is in the living God. I mentioned a minute ago about small groups and the different classes that we have. We have so many different opportunities, and if you want to get engaged in that, there's a table out in the West Lobby. Those are great. That's as it relates to community. Let me give you some practical examples how you can here's some tools. They're not the only ones, but they're they're good and they're free, and everybody likes free, right? And so I just want to draw your attention. Many of you have these already. There's an app that's just called the Bible app. How novel is that as far as fundamentals and reading the Bible, which is a fundamental that you should be involved in. The Bible app by YouVersion, it's the ministry out of Life Church in Oklahoma. My goodness, it was like 500 million downloads, I think, this point. It's just transforming the world, and I'm so appreciative of these resources. But here's why I'm pointing this to you today. You say, I don't know how to read the Bible every day. I'm just telling you, download a free app and just engage or enroll in. It's all free. Like a Bible reading plan, I can only give 5 minutes. That's great. Type in 5-minute plan, go get you a plan, read it together, and establish those disciplines. In my mind, it's like if you can't dribble with your right, then dribble with your right. If it's really hard going with your left, like I just can't even do it, right? Then I got to work on that. I got to train myself in those areas. The same way in our spiritual lives, we need to do those same things. The other piece of that is the Bible Engagement Project. That's another free app that we use. Here's why I'm sharing that again. It's not only the curriculum that our kidsmen uses in their ministry, and so moms and dads, it would be great for you to be synchronized with. And there's a tool, there's daily devotionals for you as a mom and dad, and I love what God's doing. But also, if you're not engaged in some of those things, you can create your own little small group and go through, maybe it's 2 or 3 of your friends in college or whatever, all those different areas, whatever it is. It's free. Go do it. Pray first. Oh, I can read the Bible, but my prayer life, it just seems like when I start to pray, Dear Jesus, and then I think about where I'm going to lunch. And God, I want to come into your presence. Oh, what's that? No. And you get distracted. I'm with you right there. I understand. And there's just some guides. We use this on Wednesday nights, and we've been teaching ourselves in prayer models and how to pray through Scripture and the different opportunities. All I'm saying is that when we take personal responsibility for our spiritual growth, it's not just saying, okay, I got to go figure out how to do this on my own. No, there's really effective tools that we can use to increase the fundamentals in our lives. We also have the paper version of that back in the back on the pray tables. It's a PDF printout of everything in this app. But I love this app. I use it quite often when I just need a recharge or just a refresh. There's guided prayer guides in it where there's a narrator that reads through Scripture and prays, and it's got scenery on it and all, just to focus on the goodness of God. It's just really great. So I just highly encourage you to lean into some of those spaces that would help you take personal responsibility for your spiritual growth. The fundamentals are really important. Let's return to the story of Joshua, and the team's going to help me close today. Joshua chapter 5. The story keeps going in verse 13, and it says this. When Joshua was near the town of Jericho, remember, they've crossed Jordan, they're about to fight in Jericho, and we'll see that story in the next couple weeks. Joshua was near the town of Jericho. He looked up, saw a man standing in front of him with the sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and demanded, "Are you friend or foe?" "Neither one," he replied. "I'm the commander of the Lord's army." If someone comes to me and says it with that confidence, I'm going to probably do exactly what Joshua did. At this, Joshua fell with his face to the ground in reverence. "I'm at your command." "What do you want your servant to do?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did as he was told. We're going to see in the next chapter, in chapter 6, that this instruction that the commander of the Lord's army gives to Joshua, it continues. And he maps out how to have the victory over Jericho. And it's not what Joshua would have expected. It wasn't a battle plan that he had anticipated. It was a little bit out of context or out of a character for normal strategies, but it was from the Lord. But there had to be something that took place in Joshua's life in order to prepare him to be ready to receive those marching orders. And that's what the angel of the Lord, the commander of the Lord's army there in this story was telling him. He says, first of all, you need to take a moment, recognize where you're at, that I, the Lord, am speaking to you, and you need to listen very closely. Do you understand that even last week we talked about this idea of consecration, that there, this preparing our hearts to receive? It's not a flippant thing. It's not all right, God, what am I going to do this week? No, there's just this posture of preparation that I think that the Lord is really uniquely preparing us for at Calvary for these next few months and years, what He has for us in the future. I love the fact that this end of this month we have the annual business and vision meeting. We're going to talk about future. I get it. It's great. But before we get to those Jericho moments, there's this moment that God has given us to say, Lord, even as you taught us to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Let's take a few days, let's take a few moments to posture our hearts in just that way. This Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you've heard us talk about it. We've talked about the As in Heaven event. We've debated on whether to call it. Is it a revival service? Sure. Is it a spiritual saturation event? Yes. Is it some services on Friday night that we don't have to worry about the clock as much? Yes. Is it an opportunity for you to hear different voices from the family of God in different churches and have those seeds be planted? Yes. It's all of that. All that to say, it's also the moment that we, like Joshua, I don't care if you take off your sandals when you come in, but you come in and you say, hey, this is holy ground. We're going to posture our hearts and say, God, we want to receive from you, and we want to hear what you're saying specifically to the church. It's not just about announcing another an event on the calendar. There's a spiritual process that I believe that God is taking us through as a church for us to come together, not the 11 o'clock or the 9 o'clock, but the Calvary Church. Wasn't that great on Christmas Eve to do that? And some of you have shared that. It's awesome. Love it. Some of you have lost some friends at the 9 o'clock service. You need to whatever, but we're going to come together and we're going to seek the Lord and say, God, whatever you're wanting to do in my heart and my family, let it be done on earth as in heaven. So this Friday, Saturday night are incredibly important, 6:30 every night. I'm excited to be together with you. Doug Withrop's pastor of Multiply Church in Concord, dear friend, is going to speak Friday. Mike Santiago at Focus Church in Raleigh will be here Saturday night. And then Jeffrey Portman, he's the director of Church Multiplication Network, will be with us next Sunday. The reason why Jeffrey, the message that he's going to bring is so important, there's a few weeks ago I was in Atlanta, and I was at a meeting that he was teaching and doing this session, and as soon as I heard him say it, I was like, Calvary Church needs to hear that word. I texted him afterwards and said, I don't know if you're open on this date, but I need you to come to Greensboro. He says, man, it just so happens that I am. That's the only date, blah, blah, blah. God's in it. I want you to come. We've talked. There's a word that God wants us to hear, and it's as we posture our hearts in that way and say, hey, no clock. We're going to be respectful. It's not going to be, an all-nighter, maybe, who knows, whatever, but we're going to be respectful, but we're just going to hit pause and say, God, speak to us. We want your will to be done on earth as in heaven. And that starts with us taking personal responsibility for it. So we're going to be excited to see what God does in and through us. I'm excited about this week. We want to value community. We want to prioritize being in community, and we want to take personal responsibility for our spiritual growth. It's the fundamentals. It's how God will allow us to see victory. Would you stand with me all over this room? Bow your heads and close your eyes with me, and let's just pray. God, I pray right now that your word, that your encouragement that we see through your story in Joshua, God, there was moments when we know the hurdle, the Jericho that was ahead of us. And God, we've read ahead. We know the story. There was a victory to be won there, but God, there was preparation that first had to take place. And God, help us as men and women of God, and those that maybe are in the room that they haven't begun their relationship. Help us to see those next steps that you're desiring for us to take. God, if we need to reinstill some of those fundamentals in our lives, help us to take these practical applications and ingrain them into our daily disciplines and lives. We thank you for it. With your heads bowed and your eyes closed, I would be remiss if I didn't give someone in this room an opportunity to begin their relationship with Jesus. You say, well, Pastor John, all that's great and good, but those fundamentals, they've never been there, and I know that my life is on a trajectory that is not pleasing to the Lord. The Bible says that every one of us has fallen short of God's glory because of Jesus on the cross, that he purchased our forgiveness. It's only through Jesus that we can have a new life and start afresh. If you're in this room and you say, Pastor John, would you pray with me and we're all gonna lead ourselves in a prayer. You say, would you include me in that prayer to ask Jesus to come into my heart, to be my Savior and Lord? I want to begin that relationship with him today. If that's you, would you just raise your hand up, and you may want to lift your eyes to me so I can draw eye contact and recognize you, but I just want to pray together with you. Say, Pastor John, would you include me in that prayer? Would you just lift your hand up all over this room so that I can see who you are and we can pray together with you and join our hearts with you? Wait just a second. Anyone today? Awesome. All right. If you're joining with us online today, there's a campus host that if that's you and you say, I need to ask Jesus to come into my heart, we'd love to connect with you as well there and just help you walk through that. It's the beginning of a great relationship when you do that. So church, you can, we're going to be dismissed here in a minute. I'm going to ask the prayer team to come and join me at the front, and some of them will be at the back as well. And here's what I just know about what God is doing in and through us. There's a journey that he's taking us on, and this story of Joshua provides the context to it, and there's other stories in God's word, but this is where we're at right now, and God wants us to advance, but there's these next steps in the process. So apply those to your lives personally, and we're going to see what God does corporately as well. It's going to be fantastic. So prayer team, you guys are already moving. Go ahead and come to the front here, and we're going to give you the opportunity to pray. I mentioned this in the first service a little bit more, and I'll say it this way. The altar area, the front space, and even in the back, I know I'm going to say a blessing over you, and we're going to be officially dismissed. But the reason we do that is because some of you I know have kids and time. I get it. But the space of prayer is always open. So please make yourselves available. I love sometimes when the most of us are spreading out. There's people lingering at the front here to pray, and it's just awesome. It's great. So don't miss those opportunities. You may have brought in a need into the room, and you say, man, I've got a physical need, a relational need, or whatever. And that's great, because you're in the right place where people can join their hearts together with you, and we'd love to pray together with you before you leave today. Amen.